Earlier, you talked about generational trauma and epigenetics, as you said. What are both of those things? The first time I heard about generational trauma, I thought it was like woo-woo, fluffy, hopeful, like wishful think, like a nice way to blame your ancestors for the way that you are. When I first heard about this concept that you could be passed down trauma from your parents or your grandparents, it just seemed like it couldn't possibly be true.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a relatively new area of research. So I'm actually going to separate this into a few things. So generational trauma, and you can look this up, is related to specific times of acts that were placed onto particular marginalized groups. So like first Americans, slavery. There's in Asia, there are some particular groups that were treated in a certain way. And that is so the impact of generational trauma is when something happened to one generation, there's a psychological spillover, and it can be something to do with you always feel isolated, or you always feel lonely, or you always feel at the margin, or you always feel left out. That's because a whole generation were treated in a certain way, and that has an impact. Intergenerational epigenetic trauma is about how some external event actually changes the expression of your genes. So we have a genotype and a phenotype. Genotype is your DNA. It doesn't change, but the phenotype is which bits get switched on and switched off. The most famous examples of this are the Holocaust and the Dutch famine. But there are other examples. And we are sufficient generations away from that now to have seen like 3+ generations changes in the stress responses. And it's not always bad. So sometimes people are more resilient because their grandparents or great-grandparents went through something terrible.